Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you could come to the Silent City today. It's a beautiful fall day, just gorgeous. And I'm so glad you came to visit. I don't get a lot of visitors, so it's always good to see somebody. Well, I need to introduce myself. My name is Mary Jane Page Blakeman, and I was born and raised right here in Adair County in 1839 of January. My parents were George Robert and Mary Irvine Page, and I was the oldest of 10 children. Can you believe that? 10 children. You might know some of my siblings. Well, I'm right here beside Dr. Lafayette Page, my brother, and James T. Page is on down here. He owns several thousand acres here in Adair County. You know how bachelors are. They have nothing to do but buy land, and that's what he did. And my sister, one of my siblings, married into the Frazier family. They're over the hill down there. You all might remember Kitty Frazier and all that fiasco. Well, she was part of it. Anyway, I grew up here in Columbia, loved this little town, was a member of the Christian church right over there, learned to play the piano and sing, which was a wonderful thing for me because in 1866, I met my husband, Robert T. Blakeman, a Baptist preacher from Greene County. And as some of you ladies know, a preacher's wife must know how to play the piano. So the good Lord knew what he was doing when he taught me how to play the piano. We had a good life. We were a little bit older when we married, so we only had one child, Robert Irvine Blakeman. I was so proud of my son. He grew up, was a good child, went on to dentist school, and believe it or not, actually moved to Los Angeles, California, and was a dentist out there for a few years. Met his wife and married, and then they moved back to Indianapolis, where he practiced dentistry until he retired. Now, there were a couple of things in my life that I think you all might need to know about. One in particular was a dark time here in the history of Columbia. Some of you may remember reading about the great cholera epidemic that hit this town in 1873. It was a terrible time, tragic time. People were told to leave the city, to get out if they were healthy, not to stay. Well, my brother, Dr. Lafayette, and I decided that we would stay. He doctored the people, and I sat with the sick and dying, holding hands. It was terrible. I'll never forget the Winfreys. Mr. Winfrey and his daughter and his son just died within hours of each other. They're right over the hill there. Terrible time. I hope you all don't ever see things like that, but I hear there's a terrible tragedy going on now in this world, and all I can do is say just pray and hang on. You'll get through it. Well, there was some exciting times in my life too. Not everything was always sad. I remember in 1919, I believe was the year, Columbia received word that a flying machine was going to fly into Columbia, right over in that area, near the Rowe farm, and it was going to land and refuel, and it was going to fly back to Camp Knox. Now, you all call it Fort Knox now, but back then it was called Camp Knox. Now, this was a great, great event in the history of Columbia. We had never seen flying machines here. We'd only heard about them in the Great War, and we were still in the Great War. So we got word of a certain day that the flying machine was coming in. Why, people gathered in their wagons with their blankets and picnic baskets, and they all went down into the area where the fairgrounds are and out into the flat bottoms down there, and they just had a great day just waiting for that flying machine to come through. Well, I went to the fairgrounds with some of my family to sit there and watch, and we had speakers that day at the fairgrounds, which was wonderful. I'll never forget Judge Jones spoke, and he spoke about the sacrifices our soldiers were making overseas for us to keep us safe and defeat the enemies, and how we should support them in any way that we could. Why, it was just a great time of camaraderie and patriotism when we all were so excited about this effort that was going on, and we were so appreciative. Well, all of a sudden we heard this noise coming from that direction, and it just kept getting louder and louder, and it was almost as if the ground was shaking. And all of a sudden, over the tree line, this huge silver object appeared in the sky, and the sun was glinting off of its huge belly, and it was just magnificent and awe-inspiring and terrifying all at the same time, with this huge object in the sky flying over our heads. And I just thought, oh my goodness, what a life I have led. I was able to see a flying machine in the sky. Well, I'll tell you, that day was awesome. And before I left the fairgrounds, I plopped down $5,000 for war bonds that day. I believed in the effort, and I wanted to support our men, so that's what I did. I wasn't the only one. There were several women that day, mind you, that supported the effort, and we were so proud to do so. Well, as I said, my son lived in Indianapolis, and I traveled back and forth several occasions to be with them. He had 2 children and 1 grandchild, and I was blessed to see both those grandchildren and my great-grandchild. One November in 1939, my son was bringing me back home from Thanksgiving. It's bringing me back down to Columbia. Well, we got about to Louisville, that huge city with all those roads going this way and that way, and it would just make you dizzy trying to figure out where you were going. Well, we got to an intersection, and my son started across the intersection, and all of a sudden we were hit in the side. Well, my daughter-in-law had a broken shoulder and broken ribs and was just all banged up. And well, I just had a little scalp wound, didn't have any broken bones. They checked me out pretty good for that time period, and my son decided that it would be best if I just go back home with them so he could watch over his wife and me also, and make sure that everything was good. Well, I guess that accident was a little bit more massive than we thought, because December 18th, just a few days later, I didn't wake up that morning. If I'd been in this time period right now, I'm sure they would have figured out that I'd had a concussion and a possible blood clot, because that's about what I figured took me out that morning. But it was quick, and it was a nice way to leave. You didn't have to suffer. You just kind of went to sleep and didn't wake up. The headlines in the newspaper just kind of shocked me when I saw them. It said that Adair County's oldest citizen passes away in Indianapolis. Well, I was only 94, but I guess in 1939 that was probably the oldest person here. I just didn't realize that. But I had a wonderful life. I can't complain about my life. I had a good life, and I was able to help people and cooked several meals for new mamas and grieving widows through the years, and worked in my church, and just had a good life. And I had a good husband and a good son, and like I said, was able to see my 2 grandchildren and my great-grandchild. So all in all, my life was very blessed, and I'm just so happy that you all came this morning to hear my story. I really hope you come back next year. You tell Mike Watson and Ernestine Bennett to get busy, because there are hundreds of stories out here that people want to tell. Thank you all so much for coming this morning. I hope you have a blessed day.